We have a game with the black pieces against ERT Gift, rated 1184. We have a Caro Kann on the board, which is part of our speedrun, and he captures our strong central pawn, and we do the same force move. He develops a piece with check so he can castle quickly. I'm going to block the check, but with force. If I block with the knight, he can do whatever he wants, but if I block with the bishop, he cannot just castle because his bishop is hanging. Okay, so now we can take with the queen, we can take with the knight. If we take with the queen, you do allow some move for free, but then you can improve your queen for free as well. So it's kind of double-edged. If you, yeah, he does do this, but I'm not actually convinced it's a good move in this particular case. I'm going to improve my queen for free. So he improved his knight for free, but we improved our queen for free in response. So he defends the knight, but this immediately hangs material and then more material. So that's suspicious. But if we take this and he develops his knight, he's pretty well developed and we're just running around with our queen, so I don't like that. What I do like is just developing another piece with a threat. It's for free because this knight's hanging, so he has to respond. And this is his most advanced piece. He already wasted 2 turns with it. And if he has to take, we're just strengthening our center. Okay, so he doesn't take. He tries to defend it again while developing. So it's a good train of thought. But the downside is the pawn hangs with mega threats. And normally he might have the response, like let's say you take, he might want to go queen here check because your light diagonal is weak and he's coordinating with the knight. But the knight covers that from here, so he can't even play that. Wherever he moves his queen, we can take this pawn with check and then decide what we want to do next. I don't see a downside. It looks game winning, so I'm just checking to make sure because we do have a slightly weak diagonal here. No light square bishop to block. So we want to make sure we don't fall into any queen nonsense because the queen is like a light square bishop, so we have to watch out. And our queen can't come back because of the knight, so I was just double checking, right? Okay, so he blocks this way, but that hangs the knight. So immediately bad. Also, this tactic works because it X-ray defends, although there's no point, it just looks cool. Let's take the free knight. Gets away from the queen. Okay, so now he's offering a queen trade. A lot of you will automatically take because you're up a knight. But I'm going to give you 5 seconds to find a better move. And of course, you just check. Because you don't make automatic moves, and he resigns. That was 3 minutes long. Yikes. Caro Kann. Force move. Force move because we were in check. He takes our piece. Force move. So nothing we did was like our own decisions, our own strategy. It was all just like force stuff, right? We have to take back, so that's what we do. He hits our queen. We have to move it. Force move, so that's what we do. Um, and now, I mean, it's not a forced move, but when you're in a position like this, you basically are forced to develop because you don't. That's what you have to do in the opening. You have to develop. So we just bring out our piece, and he immediately blunders. It goes from completely equal to minus 5.5, just crushing because he hangs everything. So let's see if we could squeeze in another game against Zencefeli Bogrek. 1204 provisional. I don't like provisional, but let's go d4 and see what he does. Okay, knight c6, developing and attacking the pawn, but with no pawn presence. Because he has no pawn presence, I'm going to consider kicking the knight. And because he has nothing moved in his position, I'm just going to do it. Even if it's not the best move, even if I'm going to lose this pawn one day, I don't even care. Because I'm going to have an easy game with easy development, and he's hasn't moved anything. So he moves his knight around. Let's see if we can harass it, further. You can do it with pieces like your queen, your bishop. A knight would be a trade, so unless you're trying to trade, don't do it. But I'm going to throw my f pawn up the board and create a really strong center, like in kind of like in the Alekines when you get all these free pawn moves, but different pawns. So he moves his knight again, also harassable by pawns as well as pieces, threatening nothing. So how do we want to harass it further? Do we want to do a pawn move or a piece move? And is it trapped at some point? Probably not trapped, but this allows us to fianchetto. But developing the queen is super strong because it's a centralized queen. It looks kind of devastating. Which square? Probably this one. I don't really know. What the heck? He just automatically moved his knight. I can't even propose a take back for him. So I'm going to take free stuff, because obviously. Now we're up a knight. So this video was kind of, yeah. E6, attacking our center, opening up his bishop. It makes sense. I'm just going to develop a piece towards the center. I mean, you could put pawns and stuff, but now that I'm up a piece, you could do whatever you want. You could just get your pieces out. You don't really have to worry about creating the ultimate strong pawn center, because that's like when you're equal and you're fighting for the center. Once you're up a piece, you already won the game, so it matters less. Don't get me wrong, we're still going to play e4 maybe next, but you could kind of just play with your pieces once you're winning. Just develop, develop, develop. So he takes the pawn. We're up a piece, so we don't mind trades. And he was hitting our queen, so a forced move. We have to respond. He'll likely... I don't know what he's going to do, actually. Okay, so he jumps in hanging another knight, and this is why I don't like provisional. And now he hangs his queen. Why? Okay, I'm resigning. I just resigned. This guy can win this game. I don't even care. Just start a new one. Start a new game. Okay, so we have a game against Edwin, rated 1160, not provisional. So hopefully we get some type of solid game. Okay, we get a Caro Kann on the board, so this works. Part of our speed run. For some reason, they always take and hit us with this check. The last guy did this too, and we blocked with the bishop. The last guy took. We took with the queen. The last guy hopped his knight in. But this guy changes it up. He castles first, allowing us to develop our knight and control that square, so there is no hop in. But then he resupports that square, opening his bishop, so now there is hop in potential. Fine. Let's just solidify our pawn chain, play e6, open our dark square bishop. And he hops it in immediately. Okay. Interesting. I'm going to take it. Now his strong piece is removed. He will have a pawn here that he can support with another pawn in the future. But in order to do that, he has to move this pawn off of d4, which means that I have access to c5 now. And so that gives me my own counterplay on the c file and stuff. So I'm happy with that. So let's start with, just an active developing move, taking control. That way he can't even play f4 and support this pawn. He throws his bishop there, which is super weird because if we take, it double isolates these pawns. Although, I guess in an endgame, his e5 pawn is just like a win condition for us because it's a permanent weakness. The other pawn he might be able to push and trade off at some point. Um, but yeah, let's do it. It does open up his f file though, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to say I have an endgame win condition, kind of, and we'll just try to trade queens quickly. So we do want to develop our knight and our rook. Like we want our rook here, we want to put our knight here. If we develop our knight and he pushes, we could just castle. So let's do that. We develop our knight and we could put this knight on a square that attacks this pawn. So he tries to break down our center with the c pawn, which also makes sense, but I still think castling is fine. You know, we had to spend a couple moves catching up in our development because he was already castled. So that's what we did. And now that we're castled, he takes. We want to take with a piece, not the pawn, which ruins our structure. The question is which piece? I would say, since we have an endgame win condition, let's take with the queen. Improve our strongest piece to the center with threats. We can now put one rook on the d file, one rook on the c file, and the knight can hunt this pawn, which will be hard to defend. So he attacks our queen with the knight, saying if you take, I'll develop my rook. The downside to this is that the central pawn is hanging, and once our queen is no longer on the d file, his queen is, and we'll put a rook there. So now we just, if the game was more or less even, right? Let's say even with the isolated pawns, the position is playable for white. But now at this point that you're giving me this pawn, I would say the game is definitely over. So he tries to infiltrate with the queen on the 7th. So, I mean, he has some good thoughts, but it's just not the right, what's the word? Way to go about it. I don't know. For one thing, he's losing the second pawn with check, so that's probably not good. So let's start with that. He blocks with the rook, but this pins the rook. It does defend, but it still pins the rook, which generally is not what you want. Okay, but for the time being, we have a knight hanging and a pawn hanging. We don't care about the pawn. We do care about the knight. So where do we want to move the knight? This, if he takes the pawn with the queen, where are we hopping? I suppose you could go here. If he plays here to stop your threat, I mean, you still can do it this way. Quite annoying for him. He might have to defend the rook like this. Oh, that does hit your queen. That's a lot of hoopla and shenanigans. Maybe I could just go to the center, give him back. He's going to win a pawn anyway. I guess it doesn't matter which one it is. So if I go here and he does decide to take, and I take, he wins a pawn. He's still looking at this, but that just looks wrong. What other moves do I have though? Queen c5, defending the knight, but you don't want your knight there anyway, so it's like... Here, takes, here. Does that threaten anything? At any moment he does this, you have to move your queen. I guess you can move it here just so it's protected. That does count for something. It blocks the f file, gets closer to his king. If he takes the pawn, you could just shuffle the rook over and do that. Okay, let's put it here. I know I spent a bunch of time just trying to decide where to put the knight, but I don't know. That's kind of the fun of chess, right? Because you have to make a decision. One of them might lose the game, one of them Might be the best move, and you never know. So I mean, regardless of what the best move was, this is a fine enough move, right? Because you're putting the knight on a defended square. He can't do anything about it unless he wants to kick it with the pawn, which is weird in front of his king. So, whereas if you went to the other square, let's say, once he takes this pawn, your knight is loose, kind of forcing you to move it. Not that that's bad. Maybe you have a good square to go to. That's why I was looking. But you're also forced to move it. Now here I'm not forced to do anything. I could just develop my rooks next. And taking this pawn, generally not good to move your queen multiple times. Okay, so he double stacks rooks, which in theory puts pressure on the F file, but if you're pinned, you can't move the rook. So this gives us the tempo we need to bring in our rooks. He didn't take here, so we can't bring it in on the B file, but we can hit the queen with tempo. The reason I'm going to choose my A rook is I don't care about these pawns in the short term because I'm looking at his king. And I'm not going to move my F rook, so extra protection on the F file just in case. So he does take the pawn. It so happens the other pawn is protected by my queen, so he can never win that pawn, which is a nice bonus because if you lose both of them, he does have a win condition in the endgame to connected passers. But for the time being, because of this pin, we have more immediate forcing matters. For example, when I bring my rook here, that looks annoying for him because his rook is pinned. So I'm guaranteed trades if I want it. What else do we have? Oh, he blunders his queen. He doesn't see it. It's unfortunate. But now that this is our third game, it's good so the video doesn't get too long. Perfect timing. It was a very solid game. Perfect place to blunder your queen. Okay, and he resigns. Which makes sense once you're down a queen. So let's go through the game. We get a Caro Kann on the board. He takes. We're forced to recapture. He gives us a check. We're forced to block the check with a minor piece. He takes our minor piece. We're forced to recapture, so we're not down material. He castles. We're forced to develop or close our pawn chain. Closing your pawn chain makes less sense on this turn than bringing the knight out so you can stop his knight infiltration for one more move. So we start with the knight, center development. And now you can choose between e6 and developing your other knight. Developing your other knight, it kind of allows him to jump in. Your knight, it's controlling light squares, but they're not immediately relevant this turn. Whereas if you go e6, you're opening your dark square bishop. Why is that relevant? Because it's going to help you control the dark squares faster, and those dark squares is what he's going to be attacking on. So I choose e6, small nuance. He jumps in, so force move, right? And now engine says black is half a pawn better. So that's good to know because you might look at this and say, oh, white's castle, no weaknesses. A pawn on my side, white should be better. But that's not the case because this is an extremely solid pawn structure. We have a semi-open file with our rook. Perfect bishop development, the dark squares. And this deep pawn is very strong. It's just, at most an equal game for white. So we just develop in center. And then he goes here, which I'm curious. Okay, so the engine doesn't necessarily like it, and it does want me to take. Okay, that's good to know. So minus 1.2. I thought this was weird. He does get the open F file, which is something to consider. But I figure, worst case, in the near future, he'll only have the queen and the rook. That's already defended enough times against that. You can always go knight h6, which is unorthodox, but defends the pawn, threatens to jump to f5, which is a common Caro Kann square. Also, once you castle, your rook's going to protect it. So it didn't look like opening the f file was going to hurt me too bad. I thought his pawns would be a much bigger weakness in the long run, and it seems to be the case. So we just develop towards the center. He attacks us, king safety and center. In development. And now our position is perfectly solid and perfectly harmonious with the two caveats. One, this knight should probably be on a better square, like let's say here, or f5. And then the second thing to make it harmonious would be you would want at least one rook behind your queen because either pawn push you can't take because your queen is pinned. It's hanging. So, but very close to a perfect position. But he takes our pawn, trying to disrupt our awesomeness. We improve a piece for free. It's at the center of the board. It controls everything. So he should have traded because our queen is just too strong and has threats. But he develops a knight and it goes from minus 1.6 to completely losing minus 2.4. We take free stuff. He comes in our camp. We take free stuff for free. So he has to do something. And now it's funny how the evaluation says minus 2.7 and then when I make my move it says minus 2.8. What? Okay, so out of all the knight moves, knight f5 is the best move. Look at that. Nice. Okay, so we kind of reasoned it out. We took a couple minutes, but at the end of our rationalizing, we happened to find the best move, which is nice. So it's minus 4. We just improved a piece because it was forced. And now we improve a piece for free, and the idea isn't just to hit the queen, it's to get to d2 with tempo, right? Essentially in one move, because you're hitting the queen along the way. And the whole point is because it's pinned, the rook is pinned, your rook on d2 would be just a menace. So that's the idea. Also, you want it on an open file anyway, so. And then we improve a piece kind of for free. It stares along his 7th. Too much pressure. And then he hangs his queen. So that's a 97% accuracy game. Another perfect one. Relatively easy. Never be afraid of these checks. They're harmless. They're giving away one of their best attacking pieces for no reason. And yeah, just develop, create long-term weakness, and trade everything. Find your win condition and trade everything else. And go to the end game where you just win. It's one strategy. It works very well. You just have to know what the win conditions are, which just watch the videos and you'll see. So good luck in your chess. Goodbye.